Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ, and a most warm welcome to all of you who are joining us today. We're broadcasting live from Paul VI Hall in the Vatican, and Pope Francis will be meeting with refugees who've been assisted by humanitarian corridors, as well as the groups connected with humanitarian corridors and the families who've welcomed and are providing hospitality. From wherever you're joining us today, a warm welcome to all of you. We know most of you tuning in through our various Vatican media channels, perhaps our Vatican News app or the Vatican Radio app, our Vatican News web portal, our Facebook Live page, or our YouTube channel. To all of you who may be joining us through other television or radio stations who are picking up this broadcast, a welcome to all of you. We're now seeing some of the people here who've been assisted by Humanitarian Corridors, which is a safe and legal program for the transfer and integration in Europe of vulnerable refugees, especially minors, those who are disabled, persons with serious illnesses, single parents with children who are minors, or persons with mental disorders and those who are elderly. They primarily begin in countries where conflicts are taking place, which are creating a large number of refugees. As we know from the reaction of the crowd here in Paul VI Hall, the Holy Father has arrived. We'll also be hearing from witnesses, testimonies. People who are here have arrived from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan, Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Togo, Cameroon, Guinea, Libya, and Ukraine. In the first part, we'll be hearing from members of humanitarian corridors, and the second part we'll be hearing speeches of refugees and one testimony from a family who has welcomed a family and is providing hospitality for them. Here we see now Dr. Daniela Pompei. She's the person who heads the Sant'Egidio Migrant Service, who provides a lot of service in the Human Corridors program. We're many today confused between those who have been welcomed and those who have opened the doors of their homes and hearts in this embrace that are the humanitarian corridors. It was born out of the painful memory of deaths of the people who have died at sea. Humanitarian Corridors was born out of a weeping and prayer. Prayer and sorrow helped us not to resign ourselves, but rather to reflect, to struggle to build an alternative way than the ships or the small dinghies that are coming over. Prayer and sorrow have driven us, compelled us almost to the creativity and love of which you, Holy Father, so often speak. Since 2016, 6,080 lives have been saved. These people have arrived in Europe legally, arriving for the most part in Italy, but then also in France, Belgium, and a limited number in the Principality of Andorra and San Marino. A small light in the face of a wall of impossibility and the idea that nothing can be done. This is true for those who have arrived safely, but we can also think of the many asylum seekers who write to us from countries at war or refugee camps. Humanitarian corridors are a hope for them too. There is another possible way besides the desperate one of a journey at sea. There is a way when many only see walls. Holy Father, here today we see the future. A mixed people of different populations, but who are building a fraternal and happy future. Fratelli tutti. Opening a way was the beginning, but then the challenge of each day is to live together. How many children have been born in these years? How many weddings and homes have been transformed, reunions, graduation parties. Life has been reborn even in small, depopulated areas. Problems too, of course, but so much life. The welcome has set in motion a movement of integration and peace. So many here could tell us about it. From parishes, associations, cities, religious congregations, families. So many people who felt the responsibility to welcome. And those who were welcomed yesterday, today are on the front lines to welcome others who arrive. Together is a key word of humanitarian corridors. Welcoming cannot be done alone. To provide hospitality is necessary to be together. We felt more community. This was the unexpected gift of providing hospitality. You welcome a family fleeing war and those who seek shelter, and then you discover a community of people who help each other and who together with you struggle and hope. Lebanon, Ethiopia, Libya, Pakistan, Iran, Niger, Greece, and Cyprus in a different way, Ukraine, are the outposts of the 8 humanitarian corridors from where the safe route to Europe begins. People have come from, there are Afghans, Syrians, Eritreans, Congolese, Nigerians, Cameroonians, Sudanese, Somalis, Yemenis, Iraqis, Palestinians, Guineans, Togolese, and most recently, Ukrainians. Mostly women and children. We know each other now, but this story of love and friendship was born earlier. It was born when we went looking in the hell of the refugee camps for people we did not know, but that we already felt were our brothers and sisters. The need is great. It's way too much for us to hold. We continue to support us, Holy Father. Bless us, that we may never become deaf to the cry that rises from so many places of pain. We feel the responsibility and the urgency to do more and to do it soon. Words of Daniela Pompey, who heads the Humanitarian Corridors Project on behalf of the Sant'Egidio community, one of the forerunners of this particular movement. Now we'll be hearing from Professor Daniel Garrone, President of the Federation of Evangelical Churches, which also participates in this movement. Your Holiness, dear brothers and sisters in Christ, as the scriptures say, rejoice with those who are in joy, mourn with those who are in tears. Today, the dominant note in seeing so many of you here is that of joy and gratitude. We know what you have suffered and what you have had to leave behind in order to get here, and we hope and we wish that you will find a sheltered, indeed blessed life here. There's another reason for joy and gratitude. If anything we've done to bring you here, we've done it as Christians of different denominations. This is an ecumenical dimension of the humanitarian corridors, which, as always, as churches of the Federation of Evangelical Churches, we rediscover we are all. The Word of God reaches all of us, which gives us hope and calls us to the service of our neighbor with a common vocation, which I would like to express today in the words of the prophet Micah. Man, but also woman, you have been taught what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to practice righteousness, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God. Today's joy and gratitude, however, do not silence the second part of the invitation from the Apostle Paul. Weep with those who are weeping. We all have in our hearts the latest tragic shipwreck of those who have no other recourse but a risky, in some ways foolish, crossing of the sea. Those of us who are in Lampedusa in our migration observatory, welcoming those who have made it, witness what dramatic stories each person carries with them. They carry these stories with them and often on their bodies. Sharing their weeping, their sorrow, must move to practice justice. Humanitarian corridors are one way of trying to respond to this call. This is not a naive, charitable outburst of pious or virtuous souls moved by unrealistic sentimentality. We think it is one of the reasonable responses which nations should also adopt to a problem that also questions the quality of those constitutionally erected democracies based on the protection of human rights, to which our continent has landed, having behind it tragedies quite similar to those that today force men and women to flee, who leave because they have no other prospect but to surrender. Europe, too, has been bloodied by wars, including religious wars, intolerance, and dictatorships. Even Europe has millions upon millions of migrants seeking a better future. If we look back at our past, even our recent past, perhaps it would become clear what another text from the Gospel says. You know the soul of the immigrant. That's from Exodus. Today we rejoice with you. For the rest, we continue to do our part for those who are still weeping. The words of Professor Daniel Garrone, the president of the Federation of Evangelical Churches, who is also one of the partners of Humanitarian Corridors. Now we'll be hearing from two refugees. And this is Meskarem. She's...
Buongiorno. Il mio nome è Meskarem e vengo dall'inferno della Libia.
She comes from the hell of Libya. And Meskarem is now going to greet the Holy Father. She comes from Eritrea, but they passed through detention camps in Libya, as we just began to hear our Holy Father giving them rosaries, as Meskarem wipes tears from her eyes. And this is Anna. She's from Aleppo. She's a Christian. She's been here 2 years. I often think about my city. It was beautiful. We didn't want to leave it. We resisted until 2016. We had a quiet life there. Our families, work, friends, our parish, all of our dreams were there. We hoped the war would end. Instead, it was getting worse by the day. We would leave home, and we didn't know if we would return. We saw neighbors and friends die. Bombs fell in the last period like rain, and people were always screaming, sirens. Those who were wounded, destruction was everywhere. It was a nightmare. Our little Pamela had just been born. She was 1 month old, and to save her, we decided to leave everything and leave. We went toward Lebanon, but even there, the situation got worse. Then there was the port explosion on August 4th in 2020, and Beirut was half destroyed. Again, we were homeless. We couldn't live any longer, even in Lebanon. So we set out searching. We heard about humanitarian corridors. It sounded like a dream, a chance to live in peace, tranquility, to work and commit ourselves in society. And now they too are going to greet the Holy Father. And they're saying that they represent so many other families here. The little girl, Pamela, whom we just heard of, giving a hug to the Holy Father, and our Holy Father now greeting them. Now we hear from Mattia. He's from the Marche region, and he represents the families who have not been afraid to open their homes and provide welcome to these families who've been helped through humanitarian corridors to arrive legally so that they don't have to take risky journeys, often which we know other people having to pay high prices, sometimes in detention camps where they are abused, tortured, and eventually many of them also meet their deaths in the crossings for which they've paid so much money, as we've heard recently in the latest shipwreck off of the coast of Italy. Our Holy Father now providing his discourse. Dear friends, good day and welcome. I thank all those who have explained the initiative and to give their testimonies. Thank you. I'm pleased to meet this large group of refugees and their families who have come to Italy, France, Belgium, and Andorra through humanitarian corridors. This initiative is due to the generosity and creativity of the community of Sant'Egidio. They're really good, those who belong to Sant'Egidio. Also the Federation of Evangelical Churches and the Waldensian Churches. I really like that Christians are united to work in this area together as brothers and sisters, as all of us are, and don't emphasize their differences. Thank you also to the church in Italy, which has also been very generous, particularly Caritas and the government in Italy and other governments who have welcomed you, who've welcomed many of you. The humanitarian corridors were established in 2016 as a response to the increasingly dramatic situation in the crossing of the Mediterranean, because the Mediterranean is becoming a cemetery. This is difficult. Humanitarian corridors provides security and dignity and integration, etc. Each one of you merits attention because of the difficult experiences you have had. I would like to mention in particular those who have passed through the detention camps in Libya. And now the Holy Father is shaking his head with his eyes closed. I'm thinking of the story of one of you. It took 3 years for him to arrive in Spain. It's in a little booklet. It's a terrible story.
I lager libiani, terribile. Il traffico di esseri umani.
And human trafficking.
Dobbiamo andare avanti.
We need to move ahead. The work that you do, identifying and welcoming vulnerable people, seeks to respond in the most appropriate way to a sign of the times. Thank you. Humanitarian corridors aims not only to bring refugees to Italy and other European countries, rescuing them from situations of uncertainty, danger, and endless waiting. It also works toward integration. This is important in order so that people are integrated, not just saved, but integrated. Integration helps in the salvation. I greet the hundreds of individuals, families, and communities who have with great generosity made themselves available to carry out this praiseworthy work. As I said to you, it's also generative to receive. You've opened your hearts and homes. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this story of welcoming ahead. It's a concrete commitment to peace. Welcoming or providing hospitality is the first step toward peace. Thank you very much for this. I also greet with affection those of you who have already passed through humanitarian corridors and are now living a new life. You've shown a firm resolve to live free from fear and insecurity. And I'd like to finish with you with a prayer. We're all children of the same Father. May the Lord bless all of us. He is our Father. And let us end together praying to our Father, each one in his or her own language. Our Father,
sia santificato il tuo nome, venga il tuo regno, sia fatta la tua volontà, come in cielo così in terra. Dacci oggi il nostro pane quotidiano e rimetti in noi i nostri debiti e non ci indurre in tentazione, ma liberaci dal male. Amen. Che pubblichino questo. Loro che devono pubblicare questo. Il Signore benedica tutti voi e io prego per voi e voi pregate per me. Grazie.
Francis has now gone down into the crowd to greet those here. He's in a wheelchair. The numbers speak for themselves. Humanitarian Corridors has enabled over 6,000 people to safely and legally migrate into various European countries. Italy has received over 5,000 people coming from Lebanon, Ethiopia, Greece, Libya, Niger, Jordan, Afghanistan, and Cyprus. Other European countries have taken in just about 800 people. France taking in almost 600, especially from Lebanon and Greece. Belgium, about 200 people from Lebanon. Andorra, about 20. In an outplacement program, Germany and Switzerland have taken in several people as well. Humanitarian Corridors is funded by the European Union's Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund and aims at studying the Humanitarian Corridors model in order to scale that model up in Europe so people do not get caught in illegally trying to enter Europe and becoming prey to human traffickers, as well as death itself, as many experience on the crossings made over land and sea. The Humanitarian Corridors is based on memorandum of understanding or protocols which are signed with governments in order to provide safe and legal passage and integration. The community of Sant'Egidio, of course, at the forefront, but as we also saw earlier, the Federation of Evangelic Churches in Italy, the Waldensian Church, as well as the bishops in Italy. In France, the Episcopal Conference of France, Caritas France, and the Protestant Federation of France, and the Federation of Protestant Mutual Assistance also engaged in the project. And with these images of our Holy Father greeting those here present, we now bring this audience of Pope Francis with a number of refugees, religious congregations who've been welcoming them, families who've opened their hearts and their homes, people being assisted by and who participate in Humanitarian Corridors. We'll be back again tomorrow on Sunday, as always, for the noonday recitation of the Angelus with Pope Francis. I invite you to visit the Vatican News web portal, our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter accounts, where you'll always find up-to-date coverage of all papal events, as well as coverage of other Vatican and world news. On behalf of Vatican Media, I'd like to thank our audio technician, Patrizio Ciprare, and our audio coordinator, Thaddeus Jones, and to all others who've made this broadcast possible. Please enjoy the rest of your day and consider doing your own little part, helping a migrant find a new home. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ.